May I take this opportunity to say and to acknowledge the presence of the President on the hybrid platform for this sitting. Mr. President, we welcome you. The Secretary will read the first order of the day.
Debate on the President's address on South Africa's economic reconstruction and recovery plan.
Thank you, sir. The Honorable, the Minister of Tourism.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Chairperson of NCOP, let me acknowledge His Excellency the President, the Deputy President, honorable members, good afternoon. In order to deal with the economic challenges of our country is facing, President Ramaphosa stood before this August House last week and presented South Africa's economic reconstruction and recovery plan. Fundamentally, the plan outlined by the President is about the continuation of the transformation of our society towards creating a better life for all. I think we can all agree that meaningful transformation of our society can only be achieved by building an economy that is growing in an inclusive manner. Our economy has been underperforming for an extended period, and the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic has further deepened our economic crisis by, amongst other things, disrupting the global value chains. The health crisis that had turned into severe economic crisis has happened at a time when we just about to enter the last decade of the National Development Plan, our Vision 2030. The NDP aims to eliminate poverty and reduce inequality by 2030. The plan that is subject of the debate today outlines the work that should be done to make it possible for our country to achieve this vision. Honorable members, the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan is a product of lengthy, robust discussions among social partners, government, labor, business, and civil society, who came together at NEDLEC. Although there are areas that are still subject to ongoing discussions amongst the social partners, the plan outlines major areas in which social partners have agreed and committed to work together. The NEDLEC agreements and ongoing discussion are a clear demonstration that when faced with challenges, South Africans are able to put the interest of the country first and come together and work towards resolving the country's challenges. Social partners have agreed that for our country to recover and grow at a pace that will restore growth and the capacity utilization in our economy, there needs to be a focus on the implementation of the plan in the following areas: aggressive infrastructure investment, employment-oriented strategic localization, reindustrialization, export promotion, energy security, support for tourism recovery and growth, gender equality and economic inclusion for women and youth, green economy intervention, and mass employment, public employment programs. Many people have been telling us that the problem in our country is not lack of planning, but the implementations of our plan. It is true that the success of this plan, as outlined by the President, relies on the capacity of our government to successfully implement the plan. It is for this reason that the plan has identified the capable state as one of its key enablers. Attention is being paid in ensuring that the right skills are deployed in critical areas where the projects will be implemented in the recovery program. An example of this is within the infrastructure plan program that is being implemented. Moreover, following the completion of the plan, we have also put together an implementation plan that identifies the various key projects, identifies the stakeholders responsible for the implementation of each project, and outlines timelines for completion of each project. The implementation plan is broken down into various areas. For example, we have within the implementation plan immediate actions that needs to be taken, which we are currently already starting to implement, medium to long-term implementation plan or areas of projects that needs to be implemented within that medium to long-term and long-term implementation plan. This we have done because we have learned lessons from the past. To ensure there is close monitoring and evaluation so that the implementation plan can actually be implemented and evaluated. So monitoring and evaluation within government is going to take place in the following area. Structures to oversee the implementation of the Reconstruction and Recovery Plan as to avoid mission drift. The economic cluster will receive monthly reports which, after processing and compiling, will be consolidated into a report that is submitted to the presidential team together with Vulindlela, whose responsibility after receiving these reports is to be able to interrogate them, analyze them versus against what is being hoped to achieve in terms of the economic recovery plan. And these reports then will be submitted monthly to the Economic Recovery Council that will be chaired by the President. This will not only ensure constant monitoring of the implementation and the impact of the plan, but will ensure that those given the responsibility to perform tasks are held accountable. We have learned this out of the system we have introduced as government when we dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the criticisms, again, has been leveled against government in the slowness which decisions that are important in facilitating economic activities are made. To address this challenge, the National Economic Recovery Council will be constituted comprising the relevant ministers of cabinet or members of cabinet to provide political oversight, enable rapid decision-making. The Council's priority will be to hasten decision-making to unlock any blockages that are standing on the way for the implementations to happen. Both the Vulindlela and presidential team will assist with gathering information that will help measure whether the economic implementation and growth levels are consistent with the visions that is envisaged. Honorable members, one of the key interventions that the plan has identified to be the key drivers of the economy is the resuscitation of tourism, which has been hard hit by the pandemic. For the past decade, tourism has done well, but with the pandemic, it has been hard hit. One of the things that we intend to do, as President announced, is joint marketing to be able to go out and ensure that we can rebuild our brand. We can be able to bring tourism from international borders and also ensure that South Africans are able to support our domestic marketing campaign. This will be vital for us to be able to see the recovery of the tourism sector happening. Another area which is an enabling factor for the success of the implementation of the plan will be to decisively deal with issues around criminal or issues that criminality in all its manifestation. Whether it is the issue of violent crimes or the issue of corruption, it is important for us to deal with those decisively. Honorable members, I agree with the words attributed to Shirley Chisholm, the first African-American woman elected to the United States Congress, who said, I quote, "You don't make progress by standing on the sideline, whimpering and complaining. You make progress by implementing ideas," unquote. Honorable members, standing here before you, I say without fear or contradiction that government is committed to working together with you as South Africans to reignite our economy and rebuild our economy. We call all of you as South Africans to join South Africa in rebuilding our economy. We have started to turn the tide. The South African economy will rise again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I now invite the leader of the opposition, the Honorable Steenhuisen.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I think it would be inappropriate to commence the sitting today without expressing our concern and condolences to the loss of hundreds of thousands of hectares of livestock and farming land in South Africa in the Free State, and we certainly let our thoughts and prayers be with all of those who are suffering at this time. But we're here today to debate the economic reconstruction and recovery plan announced by the President last week. But before we get too far into this, it's important that we clear up one very crucial misconception that has somehow found its way into the language of this debate. We're not trying to recover from the coronavirus pandemic, as has been repeatedly claimed. COVID-19 did not destroy our economy. We're trying to recover from decades of bad governance and poor ANC policy. And it is disingenuous and extremely opportunistic to try and claim otherwise. Our economy was in recession. More than 10 million South Africans couldn't find work, and we'd already been relegated to junk status long before anyone had heard of the word coronavirus. And when the virus did arrive, it wasn't the pandemic that worsened our situation, it was the heavy-handed response by government, the hardest, longest, most unscientific lockdown in the world. That is what closed down factories, that is what closed down restaurants, retailers, and thousands of other businesses, and that is what has destroyed our tourism industry. So let us approach this debate on the economic reconstruction and recovery plan with that truth in the back of our minds. But here is the other problem. This isn't a plan. A plan has a list of steps. A plan has details of resource allocation, deliverables, and timelines. This has none of these. It is a wish list of worthy intentions. This is a letter to Santa. This doesn't mean it's all bad, and it's in the plan. The auctioning of spectrum to bring down data costs is one of them. But this should have happened a long, long time ago. And this is not the first time it's been promised. Make it happen. Similarly, reforms to Eskom and the opening of the energy market to more independent power producers are long overdue. You've listed this in your plan. Now let's make it happen. Extending the COVID grant is also a welcome inclusion. This is a necessary stopgap for desperately poor South Africans. But there's also a lot that's missing in the plan, and none more important than the reforms to our labour legislation. This is the most taboo topic in the tripartite alliance. We will not reverse our unemployment trend in South Africa until we make our labour market far more flexible. And everybody in this House knows that. Staying with jobs, the 100,000 opportunities in the public sector is not the solution we need either. And particularly not when the same plan speaks of cutting the public sector wage bill. Even for a letter to Santa, this makes absolutely no sense. Meaningful, permanent jobs can only be created by the private sector. And that is where our stimulus and focus must lie. This plan should have also pulled the plug on bailouts to state-owned enterprises, and particularly the failed SAA. And it should have addressed our spiraling national debt with a practical debt stabilization plan. We can go on like this all day, listing the good, the bad, and the missing. But until we address the actual implementation of these things, we're just going through the motions. We're dancing in the dark. And we've been through these motions countless times in this very House, listening to a president or a finance minister wishing out loud from the latest plan, promise, or manifesto. Year after year, we've heard our unemployment numbers will be halved. Our 5 million jobs will be added in 10 years. Our 6 million jobs will be added in 5 years. These were all magic numbers pulled from magic hats. We all know that none of these things happen. No matter what the new promise was, the critical stats just continued moving in the wrong direction. There's always a vast chasm between goals and implementation, and there are important reasons for this. Our incapable state is one of them, and we've got to fix this by abandoning cadre deployment in favor of a true meritocracy. Systemic government corruption is another. We can fix this by going hard after the corrupt and reaching very hard into the benches of Parliament and into the governing party to solve this. But the biggest reason for this gap between talk and action is going to be the hardest for the president to solve. And that reason is that the ANC itself is forever opposed to its own plans. The enemies of growth and the blockers of reform are not some outside force. They don't sit in the opposition benches here, Mr. President. They sit all around you in your own party. Every single time someone in your government has stood up with a proposal for meaningful reform, they've been dragged back down and neutralized by their own comrades. And you just need to ask your finance minister. He will tell you all about that. You are surrounded by people who are ideologically incompatible with the reforms needed to kickstart growth in our economy. People who are wedded to an economic system that has never worked. People who think that states should own all property, steer the economy, and control every aspect of people's lives. People who genuinely believe that businesses and employers are somehow the enemy. People who have convinced themselves that it is more noble for someone to go jobless and hungry than work for a wage that doesn't meet their threshold of minimum. People who think that paying out 17 million social grants is somehow a huge government success story and not a shameful indictment of this government's inability to deliver dignity through employment. These are the enemies of growth, Mr. President, and they sit all around you. But there is a way around this. There's a way to sidestep the enemies of growth and get your reform agenda passed. Bring them to the House, Mr. President, and we will help you to pass them. Tuma Mina, you told us back when you stood here at the start of your president. Send me. Well, now it's our turn to return the favor. Send us, Mr. President. Let's use our combined numbers to push through labor reforms, energy reforms, fiscal reforms. Let's do what we all know is in the best interests of South Africa, even if it means going against your colleagues. Between those in your benches who believe in the power of economic reforms and the members here in my benches, we can have a majority. We can pass any reform we like in this House. On your own, you don't have much of a hand to play, which is why you're going to be locked in a stalemate. But if you let us help you pass these reforms, you can forget about the aces and the jokers. You won't need them. You will have a winning hand. Let that be your legacy, Mr. President, the president who finally chose to put his country before his party. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. The next speaker will be the Honorable Shibambu. He's also on the virtual platform.
No, thank you very much, Speaker. We want to send our deepest condolences to the defenseless people of Nigeria who continue to be killed by their own government and condemn the senseless action of the Nigerian government. Now, Speaker, all rational and sober people of South Africa will agree that the so-called economic recovery plan presented by the president of the ANC last week, Thursday, is underwhelming and will not expand the economy, will not create the promised job, and will not dent the multidimensional poverty that defines millions of largely black South Africans today. If anything, the economic recovery and reconstruction plan will serve to solidify the neo-colonial character of the economy that continues to be white-dominated, jobless, and the most unequal in the world, whilst shrinking. In the so-called recovery plan, there's not a single mention of the land question. Perhaps because the president of the ANC and the ANC as a whole are scared of the thugs who banned police vehicles and shotguns inside a court of law in Matwabeng, which is misnamed Senegal in the Free State. By the way, mentioning of agriculture and agro-processing outside the land reposition program, which this parliament agreed must be expropriated without compensation, is a sign of cowardice, typical of the so-called freedom fighters and collaborators who are leading this country today. What type of an economic recovery plan omits the land question? Because land and all that it comes with is at the center of any economy. The people of South Africa must know that any leader who does not currently and relentlessly commit to the return of the stolen land is a sellout and must never be taken seriously. The reason you did not mention the land question is because deep in your neoliberal thinking and conviction, you do not believe that South Africa must expropriate land without compensation. You are deeply happy with the status quo. The reason you did not mention the land question is because deep in your neoliberal reactionary convictions, you believe the only way out of poverty for black majority is through a job which in this context can only and must only be provided by white males, both domestic and global, who continue to dominate ownership and control of South Africa's economy. Nothing in your so-called economic recovery plan suggests that the black majority and Africans in particular must reclaim the land and gain independent access to the economy without the assistance of and reliance on white people. We are not convinced that the wealth of the land must be transferred to the ownership of the people as a whole. We are not convinced that the mineral wealth beneath the soil, the banks and monopoly industries shall be transferred to the ownership and to the benefit of the people. That is why you gladly and knowingly and approvingly got a pad from the back and shook hands with a white male, shook hands in a manner that you advise South Africans not to, when handing over a multi-billion housing project in Mooikloof in Tshwane. The only thing that excited you then, and seemingly now, is that black people will be suppliers of cheap and easily disposable labor because in your worldview, we are not deserving of ownership and control of the economy. While quality jobs are an important redistributor of wealth, they are not the only mechanism to redistribute wealth and economic participation in South Africa. Black people in South Africa, and black females in particular, must own the land and must control the banks, the retail stores, the mines, and all industries that were monopolized by colonialism and apartheid. There is nothing in your economic recovery plan that suggests that the wealth must be transferred to the ownership of the people as a whole. What is to be done in the immediate? Let us pay particular attention to the real economy in light of the growing dominance of meaningless and mostly jobless financialization of global capitalism. Modern day capitalism has found ways of profiteering without producing. There is no shortcut to real economic development than thoroughgoing domestic development of the productive forces, particularly in the manufacturing sector. The development of the productive forces needs a decisive government, which must maximally use its legislative, policy, monetary, fiscal, and procurement power to protect and promote local industrial expansion. Instead of an industrial policy that heavily depends on attraction of external over-subsidized industrial investors, the South African government must decisively use its procurement power, its monetary and fiscal policies, its trade policies, and strategic import substitution to develop localized industries. It is unthinkable that South Africa continues to import virtually all finished goods and products, which includes food, automobiles, matchsticks, toothpicks, almost all furniture products, electronics, textile, healthcare facilities, and protective equipment, whilst there is an option to locally produce all of those and thereby create bigger economic activity, create jobs, and create a larger revenue base for the state. We need to also expedite a feasible and decisive mechanism to maximally collect revenue from the digital economy, because both domestic, global, and multinational companies are mastering aggressive tax avoidance through the digital economy. We need to localize the entire value chain on essential services. Healthcare value chain must be locally produced. Chinese imports might be commercially profitable for retailers, but it is not economically viable for our economy. We need to build adequate state capacity in all economic sectors.
Thank you, sir.
We must stabilize
Your time has expired.
Mutilation is not part of the solution. We
Your
need
time has
to then deal
expired.
with those issues. And last,
Please shut off that mic. Your time
We
has
must
expired,
not-
sir. Thank you. We now have the Premier of Gauteng. He is on virtual platform.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, the President of the Republic, Deputy President, Ministers and Deputy Ministers, the Premiers, the Mayors, and the leadership of SALGA, honorable members, fellow compatriots. The President made a clarion call to the nation to rally around directing all our creative energies to the reconstruction of and recovery of our economy so that we can emerge from COVID-19 with a new economy. And that's a new economy that will create decent incomes, sustainable livelihoods, and wealth for all, not only for some or for the few. This plan is not just about growth. It is not just about recovery. It is about a different type of growth and a different type of recovery, and a different path to growth and a different path to recovery. We have chosen an inclusive and sustainable as well as transformative path to growth and recovery. A growth and recovery that leaves no one behind, and a growth and recovery that leaves no part of our country out. A growth and recovery that is based on the district development model, so that every part of our republic has got its own economic development potential unlocked. Honorable members, this is not just another plan. We have had enough plans, but this is a different plan and a plan of action that must take all sectors of society along. And we in Gauteng are ready to ignite growth, reconstruction and recovery, but through a path of transformation, modernization and reindustrialization of all major sectors of our economy, including the revitalization of the township enterprises. We are ready to do so. Firstly, we are already working with national government on this major infrastructure investment drive. We are directing investment, firstly, public investment to unlock the potential of various economic nodes in our province so that these economic nodes can have new type of enterprises. And this includes the establishment of special economic zones in various parts of our province, new cities in different parts of our province, including those parts of our province that have over time been left behind. That is the West Rand and Sidibeng districts, because we have had a development, economic development path that is concentrated in the metros. So the Reconstruction and Recovery Plan tabled by the President enables us to decentralize economic development, not just in the major cities, but throughout the Republic, not just in the most urban parts of our country, but even in the rural countryside of our province, not just in the economic core, urban economic core, but also in the townships and the villages of our country. Through this economic recovery and reconstruction plan, we in Gauteng are already doing extensive work with the different sectors of the economy to ensure that the priority sectors we have identified, those sectors of the economy that are going to be the key drivers of this reconstruction and recovery, will bring in there women, Black entrepreneurs, and young people. We are doing so by focusing on the digital economy, by ensuring that the manufacturing sector is revitalized and modernized, by ensuring that the creative industry realizes its full potential in our province, and by directing significant support to urban agriculture and agro-processing because food is important. We are doing so by focusing on localization as we build new industries to support the special economic zones that we are establishing in our province, one of which is the Tshwane Special Automotive Special Economic Zone, which is already drawing township entrepreneurs, not just people who are working in the economy in Mamelodi as sources of labor, but business people to support them to grow. This is a concrete step, a practical way of realizing the dream and the vision outlined in the Reconstruction and Recovery Plan. We are also already doing work in the area of stimulating public employment schemes. And one of the examples of the public employment schemes that offer young people opportunities in our province is how we have drawn in the youth into supporting our schools with regard to the management of COVID-19 cases. 5,000 young people are already participating in this. Public employment schemes have got their own role and they can contribute quite significantly. It's something that we are focusing on, but we are also focusing on major sectors of our economy. And those major sectors of our economy have to be supported in a very significant way on the basis that they will be transformative. This includes the green economy, the tourism sector in our province. We also ensuring that women are brought into these key sectors of the economy, particularly Black women. Madam Speaker and honorable members, I want to focus very specifically now on the work we are doing in ensuring that the township economy is integrated fully in all sectors of the major economy of our province. We have put forward at the moment a bill, the Township Economic Development Bill, which is being discussed widely in our province. And the focus of the bill is firstly to remove all the legislative and regulatory hurdles that have undermined the development of township businesses and that have discriminated against township businesses. This Township Economic Development Bill will bring major opportunities for entrepreneurs in our townships, and it will also ensure that South African local businesses in the townships are supported without any apology. This is about not discriminating against foreign nationals who are involved in business, but it is about prioritizing and supporting local businesses that are running in our township. There is a difference between discriminating against those who may need opportunities, but as well as those who have always not been supported. So we are going to ensure without any apology that local township businesses are supported. But these township businesses also need their own place in the value chain of major sectors of our economy. And that is why in every special economic zone, in every region of our province, in every district of our province, we are building new nodes, we are building new cities in support of the President's vision as well as the plan tabled here. And this we can only do by mobilizing the various sectors of our economy. We are working in partnership with various state-owned enterprises to also expand the logistics hubs and unlock the blockages that we find between Gauteng province and KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng province and the Eastern Cape in the movement of goods and services to our ports. We are working also with these provinces to ensure that we succeed in
Honorable Premier, your time has expired. Thank you.
I believe that the President has done his best. This plan is not intended simply to placate. Nevertheless, I fear that it may be absolutely unattainable. Having served for a decade in the cabinet, I know that a growth rate of 3% can never be achieved in the near future. The President's own advisory council explains like this: for every 10 rand that government spends, over 3 rand goes to social grants. Another 3 rand is spent on public servant salaries, and about R1 only on servicing government debt. Finally, corruption and mismanagement take their piece. And as we can see from the State Capture Commission, it's quite a large piece. And only then can government start funding this plan. So the question is the same as always: where will the money come from? One cannot deprecate a wish list, Mr. President, and as a wish list, this one is excellent. We have welcomed these measures before, after all: job creation, a massive build program, reduced data costs, buying local, focusing on exports, establishing our energy supply. But why will it work this time, one asks? The President asked us, and I would like to quote him verbatim. He said, "Have faith, things will be done differently," unquote. Have the obstacles really been removed? For this time, there is no room for deferred solutions, Mr. President. It seems premature to celebrate buy-in from social partners, as you said in your speech, while labor threatens further protest if salaries are not increased. The Economic Advisory Council was clear. We cannot talk salary increases when we are building from ashes. Of course, it is a democratic right to protest. But what does it say in a time like this? Where does one patriotism begins and ends in a time like this. And what does it say when an extension of the relief grant is met with calls for 100 rand more? Government colleagues is facing an impossible situation. The Fiscal stipulated 17 million citizens, as we know, depend on social grants, and borrowing has left us almost 4 trillion in debt. We therefore need to be realistic. Since 1994, there has been a regrettable tendency of expecting government to do everything for the people. In 2020, we are forced in a new direction.
Honorable Buthelezi.
Handouts must give way to hand up.
Honorable
We need to
Buthelezi.
empower our people towards self-reliance.
Your time has expired, sir. Giacolisa Bab. Siabong. The Honorable Fruneveld.
Honourable Speaker, I think there is broad consensus amongst economists and role players in South Africa that this recovery plan of the President contains nothing new. There's nothing new in this recovery plan that the Honourable President has not said before since he became the President in 2018. And firstly, we must ask ourselves, why are we in this situation where we are at present? Firstly, I want to say it's because of poor governance from the ANC on all 3 levels of governance, especially on local government level. That's why you see all these protests against poor service delivery. What do you expect if you have communities that must go without water for days because of poor governance? The second issue I want to mention is because of corruption. I want to make a statement to say that I don't think there's any level of government or actually a project where corruption is not involved. If you look, for instance, at the latest report of the Special Investigating Unit, saying that more than 2/3 of the budget for personal protective equipment has been maladministrated, has been stolen, and was not according to the correct procedures. Despite the fact that the Honourable President, in the start of the lockdown, gave the assurance to the people of South Africa that there will be no corruption. So the corruption disease, the corruption pandemic is even worse than the COVID-19 pandemic. Thirdly, I want to say, Honourable Speaker, is because of the incorrectly poor management from the Honourable President and the ANC government of the COVID-19 pandemic. Many calls were addressed to the Honourable President, asking him to open the economy, because if you don't open the economy in time, you're going to pay a dear price. That's exactly what happened. Die werklikheid is, agbare Speaker, is dat die agbare president moet 'n kop skuif maak. Hy's vasgevang in die ANC se ideologie van sosialisme en kommunisme. Hy vra dat die privaat sektor moet toetree tot projekte om werk te kan skep. But the problem is, Honourable President, the government is inviting public partners, but you want to be the project manager. That's the problem. If you change it and make the public partners the project manager of these developments, you may have success. Laastens wil ek sê, agbare Speaker, die regering moet begin besef, die staat kan nie werk skep nie. Om 800,000 werksgeleenthede te skep, moet hy die belastingbetalers se geld gebruik. Hy het nie geld nie. Die skuld van die staat teen die einde van hierdie termyn beloop 4,8 biljoen of 4,8 triljoen. U moet belastings verminder, maar u gaan dit moet verhoog om te kan verseker dat u geld kry. U moet gunstige omstandighede skep vir beleggers om te kom belê en daarom moet u wegdoen, byvoorbeeld met onteiening sonder vergoeding. Ek dank u.
En ek dank u. Thank you. And now we invite the Honorable Meshwe.
Yes, you must clean the mic there for that one. Just now get corona.
Speaker, the ACDP will support all efforts and workable plans to restore our economy to its inclusive growth following the devastation caused by COVID-19 to the country's economy. Sadly, because of the hard lockdown imposed by government to mitigate the effects of COVID-19, our economy contracted sharply, businesses have shut down, and approximately 3 million workers lost their jobs in the second quarter of this year. The interventions introduced by President Ramaphosa this past week are not new, but they are a repeat of what government said many times before. As always, government is very good with new ideas on paper, but very weak with implementation. News about the infrastructure fund that will provide 100 billion rands in catalytic finance over the next decade, leveraging as much as 1 trillion rands in new investment for strategic infrastructure projects are welcome. But we wonder whether corruption that is endemic in this country will not derail the noble intentions that the President highlighted in this House. The ACDP reiterates its call to focus more on recovering the more than 500 billion rands lost as a result of corruption. The Hawks, NPA, SARS, SIU, and other law enforcement agencies have wide powers to freeze bank accounts and attach assets worldwide. But we are not convinced that these powers are being used optimally to send a clear message to corrupt entrepreneurs and looters that crime is not profitable. All fake millionaires enjoying their ill-gotten gains must pay back what they have stolen. The ACDP would like to encourage the Hawks and the SIU in particular to accelerate their investigations of the 67% of companies that won tenders related to PPEs. It is scandalous that much of the 50 billion rands that were spent on PPEs went to companies that are politically connected, such as the President's spokesperson's family, who received a contract of 139 million rands. To ensure that such an unfair and unethical practice is not repeated, the ACDP endorses a proposal by the SIU that a legislative amendment should be made to prohibit civil servants, public representatives, and their families from doing business with the state. In addition, the ACDP proposes that the tender system be reviewed due to ongoing abuse that cost the country billions. If government is to succeed in their plans for economic reconstruction and recovery, they must be relentless in pursuing all those who have been implicated in corrupt dealings, including senior political officials and those in the House. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Meshwe. The Honorable Ryder.
On a point of order, Speaker.
Where is the point of order? Is it in the chamber?
Point of order, Speaker, is Honorable Wayne Thring from the ACDP.
You are recognized, Honorable Member. Please proceed. Point of order.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, just before the Reverend Dr. Kenneth Meshwe came up to the podium, we had Honorable Paulson from the EFF who said something about when this one comes up, we got to be careful or clean the podium, and he mentioned something with regards to coronavirus. I think that Honorable Paulson from the EFF was out of order. He needs to be called to order, and he needs to withdraw and apologize to Dr. Meshwe for those comments that he made. So you can actually listen to the recording, Speaker, and find that he actually made those comments. Thank you.
I will definitely listen to the recordings. Honorable Paulson, if you have uttered those words, you are out of order. But to be fair, I shall satisfy myself with the audio and come back and roll. Thank you very much for bringing that into our attention. We now allow the Honorable Rider.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Mr. Chairperson. Mr. President, mark me down as disappointed. Last week, Thursday, you were due to appear before the members of the National Council of Provinces to answer some questions of national importance. When we saw the notice calling a joint sitting, we were of course disappointed that you would not be giving account to the nation. And yet we hoped that you'd be taking the country into your confidence in your speech during the joint sitting. Well, that didn't happen. Instead, just like with the ANC, who's also got no new material, we got a rerun. Mr. President, you had the chance to give us all hope, to show that decisive leadership had emerged from the crises that have been caused by lockdown, to prove that you are in charge, not some faceless committee. Sadly, you chose to rebrand existing ideas and not really address some of the hard issues. A tweet that I read summed it up rather well. It said, even the Rand turned to another channel halfway through the SONA speech rerun. So let's reflect on why it was necessary to rerun SONA. The fact is, Mr. President, that you make promises each time that you deliver your State of the Nation address. And that's where we've heard all the components of last Thursday's speech before. They were just old promises. But your cabinet ignores your SONA instructions. Why has the broadband access not been released by Minister Stella and Benny Abrahams? What about sorting out e-tolls? Gender-based violence remains largely unaddressed, and in fact it worsened under lockdown. Infrastructure instructions have not been taken, and they haven't taken traction. Where they have, they are being used for corrupt ends. And the issues around power generation, the unbundling of Eskom, and greater capacity for growing our country were largely ignored until just last week. The core problem, Mr. President, is that your cabinet is not implementing your vision and your instructions. They continue with their transgressions, uninfluenced by your instructions. Either this is a sign of an administration who's in their comfort zones, ignoring political guidance due to their ability to baffle politicians with voluminous documents and frustrate interventions with technicalities, or it is a case of an executive who's not taking instructions from their president. Either way, sir, you need to take control, and this is your chance. Thank heavens for the opening, albeit reluctantly, of the electricity supply regulation that was published last week. Your minister has defied you since SONA, Mr. President. What have you done about that? What about the broadband auction that's been promised for 10 consecutive SONA speeches? It's common cause that access to fast and cheap internet improves an economy by between 2 and 5%, and it is also a great leveler of an economy. And yet, the Honourable Stella and Nomvula Mokonyane before her have defied instructions from 2 presidents to release bandwidth. What have you done about that? You are the president. Preside, and let there be consequences for those who do not do your bidding. Shuffle the cabinet if you need, to assert yourself, but more importantly, to save the nation. The power plays within the African National Congress have held South Africa back for far too long. They have caused us to stagnate, all because you are too cautious to take a stance that will weaken your political position. The Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Steenhuisen, has addressed the issues of policy uncertainty and the need to stabilise investor and international sentiment in his speech earlier. Expropriation without compensation, nationalisation and monopolisation are not favoured in modern politics and economics. The lack of a response to land grabs has got people worried. We need to get back to basics and remember what is core to government responsibility. Look for the enablers. Look at electricity, infrastructure, bandwidth, quality, education, and the rule of law. The ego-driven projects, the self-flattery, that must all stop. This is what we hoped that you would announce last Thursday. cut the unnecessary spending, stop the theft by locking up the crooks on your benches and in your departments. The goose that lays the golden egg is in intensive care. There's nothing left in the fiscus. Every program in the budget of every department needs to be re-evaluated. And where necessity cannot be shown, the project must be cut. The developmental state has become the survivalist state. The message needs to go to every minister and every department. Developmental state is a worthy ideal, and the redress is absolutely key to building a cohesive South Africa. But survival is more so, and the effect of a sovereign debt default will be devastating to your developmental projects in the longer term. Short-term pain for longer-term gain is now the only option. This is a time for urgent implementation of best ideas, not rhetoric. Do the right thing, Mr. President, and we will support you. You will find allies where you never expected, so long as you have South Africa at heart, so long as you put South Africa first, but continue to dilly-dally around the most important matters, and you will isolate yourself even further. Continue to place the ANC before South Africa, a strategy that seems to have failed you so far, both in your presidential duties as well as within the ANC. Continue to place South Africa second, and you will be short on support. Yours is a lonely position. You need all the friends that you can get. Mr. President, you followed the advice of the DA on unbundling Eskom, and now you finally agreed to allow municipalities to procure power elsewhere, although it took the initiation of a court case for that to happen. The DA's insistence that the public sector wage bill needs to be cut has now even been acknowledged by COSATU as an imperative. Is it not time, sir, to take some other suggestions from the DA in the interest of saving our economy? There are 3 important private members' bills that have been proposed by DA MPs. The Fiscal Responsibility Bill to ensure controlled borrowing and spending, another bill to ease the regulations around access to pension funds, to allow South Africans some flexibility to navigate through these unprecedented times, and the third bill to outlaw cadre deployment in order to ensure the efficient operation of government without the rampant corruption that has become synonymous with ANC government. Let's get beyond the politics and pass those bills for the sake of our people. In summary, Mr. President, you need a new cabinet that can take our country forward. Parliament needs to embrace new thinking to adapt to this changed world. South Africa needs a government that will fulfill the promises to take us out and forward of this mess. It's your move, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well done.
The Honorable Buthelezi, NS.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker and Chairperson, Your Excellency, the President Ramaphosa, Your Excellency, Deputy President Mabuza, Honorable Ministers and Deputy Ministers, Honorable Premiers, Honorable Members, Honorable Councillors, compatriots, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by the biggest denialist I've ever heard, the leader of the opposition. He is a denialist of, I've never heard somebody who denies that coronavirus have had a devastating effect on the economy. Where do you start? Even ingane zikhuluma ngayo, even ingane zikhuluma ngayo nakayazi. Secondly, the honorable member from the Freedom Front Plus just reminded me of my days when I was still a student, when we were protesting against apartheid and Bantu education. What they will tell us, they'll just bring up the Roy Gefar. The Roy Gefar. That's what he came here and he spoke about Roy Gefar. I don't think it needs to be taken any further. While there could have been some doubts from many people about the effectiveness of the national state of disaster when the president declared it in March, now with the benefit of hindsight 2020 vision, I think we can all look back with pride and say, indeed, we made it. We avoided calamity. We ought to celebrate that. However, that came at a huge cost to the economy. The economy shrunk, revenue under collection grew, debt soared, and over 2 million people lost their jobs. And that's not only a South African phenomenon, it's a world phenomenon. The plan is a clarion call to all of us to action, action, and action. There is no time for bickering. We agree with the President that social compacts are essential to effective and sustainable growth and development, unquote. Let me talk about exports. The continental free trade area creates a market of about 1.34 billion people with GDP value of 3 trillion rand, which is about 50 trillion rand. The ACFTA promotes intra-African trade, Africa trade with everybody else but itself. Intra-African trade is at about 17%, which is far below of other regions. The President cautions that, quote, when he talks about ACFTA, the colonial era of Africa being a pit stop for assembly was over, unquote. He continues to say, we must all ensure that AFCTA does not become a conduit for products with a minimal African value addition to enter and penetrate our local markets under the guise of continental integration, unquote. It is an accepted truism that nations that have been able to develop have strengthened their manufacturing sector. I want to commend the renewed focus on industrialization and infrastructure in the President's Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Action Plan, the plan. On manufacturing, when we look at the source of fast growth of Germany and Japan after the Second World War, of Korea in the 1970s, China in the 1990s, the common theme is that each of these countries built strong competitive industries. Wealth is created through investment in productive sectors of the economy and strengthening such value chains. Development is enhanced through decent jobs for workers. Transformation is achieved through opening the economy to small and medium-sized businesses, cooperatives, and a focus on providing opportunities for youth, women, and black industrialists. We see these streams strongly embedded in the plan. A careful reading of the economic plan shows that it contains both measures to promote aggregate demand and to improve supply-side performance of the economy. On the supply side, the plan identifies the practical steps that will now be taken to address the energy shortages, improve the spectrum allocation, to strengthen the digital economy, boost investment in infrastructure, and overhaul the country's logistics and transport system. This is bold. New focus is on implementation. Mr. President, Cabinet will have to work in new ways. During wars, countries have war cabinets. During the COVID crisis, we showed it. South Africa has a command council. Similarly, for reconstruction to be successful, clear coordinating structures are needed, ones that are lean and agile. The plan will require full support of the private sector, and we call on the business community to step up investment in the domestic economy and to heed the call to localize more of your procurement. On localization, a key focus of our economic recovery will be on driving localization and deepening local manufacturing value chains. Every year, South Africa effectively gives 25% of its GDP away to other countries around the world in the form of imports of goods that do not add value here. The plan contains a series of specific value chains where social partners, please underline social partners.
Honourable Speaker, I'm sorry to disturb the Honourable Member. I would like to know if he's prepared to answer a question.
Honourable Tellis, will you take a question?
Just keep it.
He's not prepared, sir.
The plan contains a series of value chains where the social partners will work together to localize more of the production. These include the following: the healthcare value chains, pharmaceuticals, personal protective equipment, and medical equipment used in public and private healthcare facilities. 2, basic consumer goods, clothing and footwear, home textiles, consumer electronic products, and appliances, to mention but a few. Capital goods, equipment, and industrial inputs, particularly used in infrastructure projects. Construction-driven value chains such as cement, steel, piping, engineered products, and earth-moving equipment. Some of these products are now designated by the state for local procurement. This allows our infrastructure investment to drive the local supplier industries. We are particularly pleased that the NEDLAC agreement commit all companies and the government entities to publicly declare and disclose in their annual reports how much they have bought from local producers and what steps they will take to improve localization. Honourable members, only components and products that are manufactured locally should be used on public infrastructure projects. This should apply to all construction paid for by the state. It should also apply to renewable energy projects supported by the state. We have an opportunity to take our economy forward, and we must now keep all our focus on implementing this plan. The President argued, and correctly so, that if South Africa were to manufacture 10% of its imports and supply 2% of Africa's import from outside the continent, that will add a whopping 3.2% to our normal GDP. The ANC welcomes the commitment of social partners to prioritize a range of consumer industrial projects for local procurement. Manufacturing, localization, exports, and infrastructure development are key to inclusive economic growth and transformation. We urge upfront companies not to repeat what they did during 2010 Soccer World Cup build program. They should not collude to defraud the people of South Africa. Let me close by borrowing patriotic words from Jeff A. Kennedy and say, quote, ask not what country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country, unquote. Indlela icacile. Let's stop whinging, let's stop complaining, as Kumbule Uguti, only people who do something will be able to make mistakes. Laba bahleli behlala bebangumsindo, they'll never be able to do mistake. Asibayeke ke siqhubeke thina esinikwe umsebenzi wokuthi silide abantu base South Africa so African National Congress. Ngiyabonga. Question?
Your time expired. Honorable Mulder. His time had expired, sir. The order members, we now welcome the Honorable Retired General B.H. Holomisa. He's on virtual platform. Honorable Holomisa.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, sir.
Hello?
We can hear you. Please proceed.
Thank you. Honorable Speaker, Mr. President, and honorable members, the UDM welcomes President Ramaphosa's ideas around South Africa's economic reconstruction and recovery plan, especially the use of massive infrastructure development projects and the rebuilding and cultivation of the manufacturing industries. However, Mr. President, we have heard this noise before and asked that you at least publish a map of the areas that will be targeted so that we can clearly see what is going to happen, where and when. The role of NEDLAC and their commitments were mentioned during your speech. But the UDM believes that we have not had any meaningful commitment in terms of big capital investment from big business. An unfortunate state of our economy is that the government has become a main source of easy money through contracts and tenders, which have been fraught with abuse and corruption. On this score, I also want to add that government has become an extremely poor customer as it tolerates unfinished projects and shoddy workmanship. One matter, Mr. President, which I would like to take onto the debate is government's continued use of government employee pensions fund in an irresponsible manner. It is immoral that these monies are used to make instant millionaires and billionaires who are in it for themselves and their families. The Public Investment Corporation, that is PIC, is supposedly investing these pension monies, but it is unacceptable that the PIC's funding models are not producing sustainable job-creating businesses. Moreover, it is worrying that the PIC, and here I include the DBSA, IDC, are not administering their debt rosters perfectly, or rather properly. And the hyenas are either unable to or willfully do not service their billions reference and are lost through write-offs. In conclusion, in addition, money is lost through international
Honorable Holomis,
that exploit using local people to siphon billions of rands from our shores. Equally so at home, we have seen the likes of Jarenda Naidu losing to stain of 15 billion of the PIC.
Your time has expired.
All right, that's it.
Siyabonga tata.
All right, Para, Diabulela.
Diabulela. We now invite the Honorable Zungula.
Thank you, Speaker. Firstly, I would like to extend my deepest condolences to the families of the 13 people who lost their lives this morning at Ulundi. Mr. President, you presented the economic recovery plan when 2 million citizens lost their jobs and the economy has been contracting. The reality is people are hopeless and they were hoping for a clear, practical plan that is not like the other sonas you've presented in the past. In 2018, you promised 1 million jobs. In 2019, 2 million jobs. In 2020, 60,000 jobs per month for young people. Sadly, we don't have anything to show for these promises as the unemployment rate has increased to 42%. We would have hoped that we have mass economic participation of the citizens as a top priority, particularly for young people. The 58% youth unemployment rate is a ticking time bomb that requires urgent attention. Youth in Business South Africa wrote to you in April and offered tangible solutions to reduce unemployment, but sadly, you ignored them. Mr. President, we are not going to solve the problems with the same kind of thinking used in the past 26 years. We need to transform our thinking and have innovative solutions. It is time to diversify the sources of income generation for the citizens and utilize the 400 billion rand informal economy as a means of driving mass economic participation of citizens in the economy. Mr. President, traders in the informal economy are the most poor and often trade for survival. It is cruelty not to reserve this sector for our most vulnerable citizens. The over-reliance on formal employment is not working. While developing economy, we need to utilize the nature of our economy to our advantage. There must be a clear program to use the artisan economy to absorb many frustrated young people who aren't economically active. We would have hoped that the plan would have commitments for government procurement to be at least 50% from the SMMEs. The reality is SMMEs are the worst affected by the lockdown. The plan should have prioritized SMMEs. SOEs must be exempted and freed from PFMA and triple PFA to enable them to compete and increase participation by the SMMEs. The government should ensure full compliance of immigration, labor, business laws for all companies and departments. All must be equal before the law, regardless whether they are rich or poor, citizen or non-citizen. With the unfortunate reality of non-citizens getting preference over jobs and business opportunities in our country, all your plans mean nothing if citizens aren't the preferred beneficiaries. The priority of any economic recovery plan must be to diversify sources of income in order to have mass economic participation of citizens in the economy. Thank you.
Siyabonga Tatu Zungula. Before I call the next honorable member, the two honorable members right in front of me at the back, whatever you're conferring with must now come to an end. Please separate. Thank you very much. the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure. She is on
Honourable Speaker and Honourable Thank you, Speaker. Honourable Speaker, Honourable President, last week the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan that will drive growth and inclusive transformation was presented by the President. I want to inform honourable members that I've made a request to the Speaker to make an executive statement and address the House early next week, where I will unpack the infrastructure components of the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan in more detail. The plan aims to drive greater job creation through infrastructure investment and mass employment programs. Infrastructure investment is one of the key drivers to stimulate investment and economic growth and to create employment. The aim of the infrastructure projects within the plan is to be a catalyst for the struggling construction sector, which is being hardest hit in our economic recession. Since the end of 2019, the Department of Public Works has worked very closely with the Infrastructure Investment Office and the Presidency to put together a pipeline of projects that will transform the landscape of our cities, towns, and rural areas. The first phase of the Infrastructure Investment Plan include projects from all three spheres of government, state-owned enterprises, and the private sector. The infrastructure plan not only speaks about new infrastructure, but also about maintenance and repairs of existing infrastructure. 62 projects have been gazetted in July and prioritized for implementation with all regulatory processes that will be fast-tracked, enabling over 340 billion rand in new investment from the private sector. Many questions rightfully have been asked about implementation. And I'm pleased to say that some of the gazetted projects are at various stages of project life cycle, and some are already underway. Those projects that are already in construction will see the future phases also brought earlier for implementation, including some human settlements projects which have already received bulk funding finance to unlock them. The infrastructure plan projects that will also focus on critical network infrastructure, such as ports, roads, and rail that are key to our economic competitiveness. To ensure that there's active implementation of our infrastructure build program, we have established Infrastructure South Africa, and the Infrastructure Fund has been operationalized to provide capacity to prepare and package projects. Honourable members, we are using 3 funding instruments to ensure that infrastructure projects will be implemented. The first funding is from the private sector, and this includes also funding from multinational bodies.
Thank you, ma'am.
The second source is...
Honourable Minister, thank you very much. The next
These are the 3 minutes.
Honourable members, can we have some order, please? We now recognize the Honourable. Will you please? Honourable members, can we have some order, please? We now recognize Honourable Mfayela on virtual platform.
Honourable Speaker, allow me to emphasize my leader's words. Yes, ma'am. Honourable Speaker, allow me to emphasize the words Dr. M.G. Buthelezi.
Honourable Mfayela, please. Honourable Member Mfayela, if your TV is on, can you please switch it off? or switch off
Yes,
your
ma'am, I've done it.
visuals. Thank you very much. You can
Yes, ma'am.
proceed, sir.
Yes, Honorable Speaker, allow me to emphasize the words of my leader, Dr. M. Buthelezi, when he said, hands out must give way to hand up. We need to empower our people towards self-help and self-reliance on a large scale. The subsistence farming, small businesses, collaboration and cooperation can become the lifeblood of our survival, Madam Speaker. We have looked at the macroeconomic plan often enough. We now need to look at our people. There are individuals who have lost their income, whose businesses have been wiped out. We are struggling for hope. Big plans won't put food on the table today, Madam Speaker, but a million small interventions that help us to help ourselves. We can restore what has been lost. By empowering our people, recovery will eventually become growth. Madam Speaker, the IFP, we believe that SMMEs hold the key to unlocking potential within economy, which, according to research by Small Businesses Institute, constituted the majority of the business community in the economy in terms of numbers, 98.5%. The President himself stated that SMMEs number between 2.5 million and 3.5 million, and that they offer the greatest untapped potential for growth, employment, and fundamental economic transformation. Why then did the President's speech dedicate a mere 4% to the role of SMME and support and intervention plan for this sector? As IFP, we will hold the President to his pledge to create enabling conditions for a competitive, inclusive, and fast-growing economy. We further welcome his undertaking that government is fast-tracking reform for reduce the cost of doing businesses and lower barriers to enter. Mr. President, now is the time for action. Our people deserve no less than what we have promised. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Siyabonga Baba. We now welcome the Honorable Sheikh Imam on virtual.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Allow me to start off by wishing the Minister of Health, Dr. Mkhize, and his wife well in this difficult time of COVID-19. Mr. President, we welcome your plan, your recovery plan that you've put in place, that you have spoken to us about. However, a plan is as good as its implementation. Now, you've given us a plan, we've heard these things before. Let me just indicate a few of my concerns. First of all, if you talk about infrastructure, where a lot of your hope is that we would be able to create jobs and boost the economic development in the country. But year in and year out, we are underspending in terms of infrastructure in the country. And there is no doubt about it. The latest report from Statistics South Africa, billions of rands are being underspent as far as infrastructure is concerned. The question is, do we have the capacity to be able to implement them? No. If you don't deal with the issue of the capacity, you can forget about implementing those infrastructure projects you're talking about. It's not going to work. I'll give you a good example. On an oversight, we observed that there were companies that were putting on projects in water and sanitation who did not have the financial muscle to even buy the goods. And those were being imported from India, China, and the United States of America. We suggested that government provide the material if you want to promote BEE in South Africa. That has not happened up to this day. So I'm not sure how we're going to be able to implement that. Let's talk about the jobs, Mr. President. You speak about creating 800,000 jobs. Of this, you're talking about 363,000 jobs in the public sector, despite the fact previously we have all agreed that we have a bloated public service wage bill which we need to reduce. I'm not sure how we're going to sustain this over a long period of time. Let's talk about the manufacturing industry, particularly in localizing. Have you, Mr. President, spoken to NEDLAC and the different unions in the country? Because the cost of doing business means businesses in South Africa cannot sustain, you cannot export at the high cost of doing business in South Africa. Added to that is the problem we're sitting with the imports that are coming into the country, and the Chinese paying even low 70 rand a day labor in South Africa. That is why so many of our people today remain unemployed. You talk about corruption, Mr. President. Corruption continues. You speak about the procurement bill. Your colleagues from the ANC in some of our committees have agreed that the procurement bill is not good enough to stop the corruption and the looting in the country. We need a relook at that. You spoke about gender-based violence. Your very own has been responsible or has been alleged to have raped 2 little girls. You have done nothing about trying to oppose this bill or going and appealing this decision of giving, and yet you find that there are ANC members that are going and supporting. We spoke about the housing. Now that there's going to be a Hoytkloof 84 billion rand investment, it's our land, it's our money, somebody else is going to benefit. What happened to the human
Thank you, Honorable Sheikima.
So the next
time is up. Your time is
Thank
up.
you very much.
Thank you very much. We now welcome to the podium the Honorable Shabalala.
Good afternoon, honorable members, honorable speaker, ministers, deputy ministers, members of parliament, and viewers at home. President, and you are highly recognized, and I want to categorically put it as the African National Congress, we support the recovery plan full. So, you, President, had said to us, South Africa's economic reconstruction and recovery plan sets out bold vision and immediate action to enable an economic rebound and to build the economy of the future. It brings together the work of government departments, the economic recovery action plan agreed by social partners at NEDLAC, and contributions from the Presidential Economic Advisory Council. Now, when we say NEDLAC, it means the society is multi-forces, so we've agreed with the plan. So can we continue? Now, I want to quickly speak about what have we done and what does the plan seek to address. My apologies, Honorable Chief Whip of the Majority Party. I was meant to speak to SOEs, but I feel very eager to really go to the plan and just speak about what have we promised, because that plan has got timeline. So if you care to read, these opposition parties who've been coming here and complaining every time. And the next thing, this DA leader and says to us, we close the economy. How do you open an economy when 1 million people and lives have been lost in the country? But you want us to sit here and open an economy. We don't care about the lives of the future, because we were saving the lives. And what South African government has done is done very well, opposed to this DA. You cry about corruption. Speak about the corruption of also your PPEs in Western Cape. Did you do anything about it? You want to a cabinet reshuffle the MEC of police in Western Cape that fails to deal with gangsterism. You want us to complain about issues of GBV that affect the society. Let's speak about reconstructing a society in South Africa so that you don't caution the blame to the president. The president tells us and says to us that GBV is a pandemic.
House Chair, on a point of order. House Chair, on a point of order.
Yes, what's a point of order?
House Chair, I'm afraid I have to rise on a point of order because the honourable member at the podium has just told this House that COVID has cost our country 1 million people.
The world, sit down.
So we need to know now, has Minister Mkhize lied to us, or is the minister, or is the member at the podium in fact misleading the House? Because the last stat that I heard from the Minister of Health was not 1 million people.
I'm afraid that's not the point of order.
That's not what I said.
Please proceed.
You must listen. 1 million lives has been lost in the world due to COVID-19. Let me speak about employment stimulus. We speak about employment stimulus, and this is what the document says to us. It says the actions to establish the Social Employment Fund to support community-driven work from the common good. Who must do that is President. Create 50,000 new opportunities in environmental programs and 14,000 new opportunities in community forest. Who must do that? Environment, forest, and fisheries. Support 74,626 small-scale farmers to expand production and access market. Who must do that? Agriculture, land reform, and rural development. We must create 25,000 new opportunities in labor-intensive municipality infrastructure maintenance. Who must do that? Department of Public Works. We must create 37,097 new opportunities in rural roads and maintenance. That is infrastructure build program. And who must do that is transport. We must create 5,531 new job opportunities in the common health work. Who must do that is Department of Health. Create public employment in cities, national treasure. Create 300,000 opportunities for teaching and schools assistance protect 44,933 vulnerable teaching posts. Who must do that? Basic education. Provide support and livelihoods, cultural and supporting sector. Who must do the sports, arts and culture. Support 5,000 young entrepreneurs and micro enterprises. Who must do that? NYDA. Now the last one, expand the PPO incentive to create 8,000 jobs in global business services. Who must do that? Trade and industry. Now you want to tell me there's something wrong with the plan. Clearly there's something wrong in the country. If its own political party or opposition don't even want to address this and hear this about, we want to call on a strategic equity partner in terms of our SOEs. We're making the call and we're committing ourselves and we're saying we're dealing with the issues of corruption in terms of SOEs. Transnet is a very locomotive industry. We've got Denel that is very important for the sovereignty of the country. We've got Self-Call that is very important for our rural communities. We are dealing with these matters. We're hands-on deck. So you must not create almost as if there's halapalu. And let me tell you what we've done in Transnet. You are making noise. SIU, we're saying civil recoveries in terms of SIU, and Eskom and SIU lodged a civil claims against former executives to recover 3.8 billion that was illegally diverted from the company. The issue of criminal proceedings, as we are speaking, there are 2 former Eskom executives arrested and charged for corruption and fraud in relation to 745 million contracts. The declaration of delinquency from a former board member of SAA, declared delinquency by the court, directed delinquency proceedings underway in former board members of Self-Call, deregistration of professional bodies, Eskom former CFO found guilty of professional misconduct and deregistered from SA. So I want to say to the country and to the president of this country, we're well on the road. You don't need friends like this. These friends are very manipulative. Do not allow them. They want to utilize you. They want to cause division on this side of the ANC must be united. And the ANC issue around unity of purpose is very critical. Corruption must unite us as the ANC. And I want to say to also all the provinces, be it KZN, Gauteng, corruption, whether of PPEs, the Face AG report speaks about it, all those things, it must unite us as a country, all of us, because corruption manifests itself everywhere. It does not only rest within only public servants, it doesn't only rest within our own politicians. It's a system we inherited, we found ourselves of colonialism, of this apartheid regime that really put in the minds of our people that is good to steal from the vulnerable. Now, as the African National Congress, we are morality and duty bound to correct and reverse this evil acts of apartheid against humanity. Whether we like it or we don't, apartheid existed in South Africa. And if you want me to speak about it, I'm more than ready to do so and address you. And I want to tell you, you were saying to us that, for instance, on SAA, that it was better in the past. No, it was better in your eyes because it was servicing the minority. Now we're speaking about an SAA that must be able to service the majority of our people. And more
Time
than
is up.
47.
Remember.
The ANC supports the plan. Thank you.
The next speaker is Honorable SF de Kooit. SF de Kooit.
Agbare voorsitter, Honourable President, it may become time that the ANC deregister as a political party and register as a planning company. Because since 1994, it is all that they've done, with the exception of draining state funds in the name of so-called redress. What we have seen, however, is less redress and more cadre advancement, mismanagement and corruption. You attempt to mesmerize South Africans by promises of job creation, industrial development and job prosperity, without any specifics on how this will be achieved and with which funds. Mr. President, you urge all South Africans to work together, but in fact, your party politics makes it impossible. Die Vryheidsfront Plus vra vir groter belastingverligting vir sakeondernemings en individue. Die enigste manier om die ekonomie oor die langtermyn te red, is om belastings en tariewe te verlaag, besteedbare inkomste te bewerkstellig en Suid-Afrika aanloklik vir beleggers te maak. Mr. President, it is evident that you still put the interest of the ANC above that of the country. You were also leading the country when you said that the economy must be restored and blaming the devastation caused by COVID-19. The Honourable Buthelezi, Mr. President, it is in fact not COVID-19 that had the devastating effect on the economy. It was the draconical regulations and directives imposed by you and your ministers, who are all members of the ANC. More importantly, it was the fact that the economy was in tatters before COVID-19 struck. Do not conveniently hide behind the worldwide pandemic. Take responsibility for your comrades' action. Be a man, be a president. Agbare voorsitter, die Suid-Afrikaanse ekonomie kan nie floreer as die regering aanhou om dit te reguleer nie. Dis 'n bewese feit dat swart ekonomiese bemagtiging, radikale ekonomiese transformasie en onteiening sonder vergoeding nie die antwoord is nie. Die regering moet dringend begin fokus op die belange en vooruitgang van die land en nie net op sommige van sy burgers nie. The irony is that over 2.2 million jobs were lost in just 6 months by the hands of the various ministerial regulations and directives issued by your ministers. Now that you realize the damage which has been done, you want to sweep in your self-created chaos and emerge as a hero by promising 800,000 employment opportunities that will be created or might be created in the months and years to follow. Still, we are sitting with the current economic crisis, Mr. President. It was caused by your government, not by the white people in the country. I challenge you, Honourable President, show us if you are a man of your word. You say that you will expand the natural resource management programs such as working on fire and working on water. Please handle it as a matter of urgency, Mr. President. South African farms are burning. Farmers need assistance urgently, Mr. President, now more than ever. Show South Africa that you regard the current crisis and the needs for farmers, for the producers of food, for South Africans as a priority. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Honourable MP Gallo.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. President, Professor Raymond Parsons of the prestigious Northwest University Business School recently apportioned drift, poor governance and corruption as the big enemies of service delivery. Parsons' findings dovetail with the long-held view of the African Independent Congress that to dent the effects of generational and structural poverty and inequality and now COVID-19 pandemic is through mass employment and enhanced social security net, a deliberate multi-party response targeted at state incapacity and financial mismanagement must define government's long-term growth objectives. The Reconstruction and Recovery Plan was announced by the President alongside its clearly defined and demarcated growth-enhancing pillars, must therefore be buttressed by decisive collective leadership across the political divide. The role of the social partners cannot be gainsaid. In our 2019 manifesto launch, we advised this government, to which many trade unions agreed, that to create an enabling environment for the small, medium, and micro enterprises, sustainability set aside preferential procurement, funding, and overhauling the exclusivity clauses maintained in various lease agreements needed to be speedily looked into and acted upon. When the Competition Tribunal confirmed the consent agreement between the Competition Commission and ShopRite, we pride a place on our resolve to championing the cause of SMEs development. And at this juncture, we wish to pause to congratulate Mr. Sandile Zungu, the new chairperson of Amazulu Football Club, for his new venture. Mr. Zulu's work on SMEs development is legend. Honorable Chair, to stimulate economic growth, thereby improving the lives of many South Africans trapped in cycles of grinding despair, we cannot afford to turn a blind eye on corruption. It is not enough to allocate resources to stimulate economic growth if the people entrusted with the responsibility of overseeing state resources have a field day feeding at the trough with impunity. Corruption can no longer be tolerated. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is from Cope. Honorable member from Cope. We will then move on to the next speaker, who will be from Salga, Honorable Councillor Ngadimi. Honorable Ngadimi.
Thank you very much, Chair. I am delegated by the National Executive of SALCA. My name is Ola Pagat. Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Mdise, Honorable Chair of the NCOP, Mr. Masondo, President Cyril Ramaphosa, Ministers and Deputy Ministers, Premiers and Mayors, SALCA and leadership. I greet you all. Honorable Speaker, we meet at the time when our country and the global community is at large being decimated by COVID-19 pandemic, which has posed a threat not only to lives but to livelihoods. This pandemic has brought into sharp focus the deep and chronic inequalities bedeviling our country. While these structural inequalities were prevalent pre-COVID-19, they have nonetheless become more glaring during the pandemic. It is therefore incumbent upon all of us to use this crisis as an instigator of economic transformation and in the process create a new inclusive economy that works for all. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that we dare not waste. As the saying goes, in every crisis lies an opportunity, and the deeper the crisis, the better the opportunity. Honorable Chair, the road to economic recovery will be long and hard, fraught with pitfalls along the way, no doubt. Throughout this journey, local government will serve as a beacon, a point of reference as we navigate this uncharted terrain. As a sector, we are uniquely positioned as a frontline sphere and the chief catalyst for economic development. And with this, we carry on our shoulders the hopes and aspirations of all South Africans. The district-based economic recovery plan, which is piloted on 44 districts and 8 metros, is a testament to the centrality of local government in the country's economic future. From the onset, Chair, SALCA has always supported the district delivery model, as it is our firm belief that district and metro spaces offer the appropriate scale and arena for intergovernmental planning and coordination. This being said, we implore all that district plans be synchronized with the integrated development plans of municipalities. And this is of a particular significance as IDP processes are subjected to a vigorous public participation process, and as such, they reflect the needs of communities. Honorable Chair, a common factor in the economic reconstruction and recovery plan is mega infrastructure investment undertaking. This commitment is evidenced by the gazetting of the strategic integrated projects in July, which signaled the urgency of getting the economy back on track. Infrastructure investments have a powerful multiplier effect. They enhance accessibility and facilitate trade, improve mobility, generate greater employment opportunities, and boost overall economic productivity. SALGA, on behalf of our members, will work hand in hand with COGTA and Municipal Infrastructure Support Agency in the Municipal Infrastructure Maintenance Program as we explore the most appropriate solutions to address the repairs and maintenance backlogs. The Rural Road Maintenance Program is of particular significance to us in view of a sizable number of our municipalities being predominantly rural. In addition to providing connectivity and access to market and economic opportunities, the labor intensiveness of the program will go a long way in alleviating poverty in rural communities. As a sector, we will augment these initiatives by redirecting our capital expenditure to be oriented towards the reconstruction and recovery plan. Honorable Chair, one of the hallmarks of the economic reconstruction and recovery plan is unlocking investment and growth. Through our trade and investment program, SALGA will continue to support municipalities in dismantling the burdensome bureaucracy and red tape that stifles investment. This is even more pertinent now as we are in a period of economic uncertainty where new investments will be hard to come by due to low levels of liquidity in the market. In the ease of doing business domain, we will up the ante in support of the economic recovery efforts in the different sectors of the economy. That being said, we remain conscious of the fact that good governance and financial management are important proxies for investment, which is why we'll continue in our relentless pursuit of getting the basics right and inculcating a culture of responsive and ethical leadership, as well as making sure across all spheres we extract accountability through consequence management as provided by the legislation. Honorable Chair, through the first two South African investment conferences, South Africa has managed to secure pledges of around 664 billion in new investment. It is, however, organized local governments wish that municipalities be represented in these national conferences. All investments, Chair, they land in municipal space, and as such, the visibility of municipalities in investment conferences will go a long way on recognizing and positioning local government as a critical role player in investment promotion, attraction, and facilitation. SALGA further commends the positioning of South Africa as one of the most attractive destinations in the world for global business services through the Ease of Doing Business reform program, which seeks to improve the country's doing business world ranking from 84th to 50th by 2021. This ambitious target can only be achieved through the institutionalization of the sub-national doing business program and the revision and expansion of the World Bank methodology to include non-metropolitan municipalities.
Your time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
The next speaker is a speaker from the EFF, Honorable S. Lutuli. Honorable Lutuli.
House Chairperson, South Africa is at a crossroad. More than 40% of the population is unemployed, and lezi zibalo zizakunyuka uma kungekho shintsho olujulile. We are the most unequal society in the world. This is all a recipe for a social unrest, which if equal, it will spare no one kule lizwe. Lezi zinkinga esibhekene nazo zidinga abaholi abaqotho nabazothembeka kubantu baseNingizimu Afrika. Ayidingi amacebo akudala alokho ephindaphindwa, futhi le nkinga ayisadingi ubuholi obufuna ukubukwa kepha bube bungamavila okubhekana ngqo nezinkinga zomnotho waleli lizwe. Iqiniso lithi lezi zinkinga besikuzo lungakofiki lolu bhubhane lwe-COVID. Kepha laba abaphethe abanaluzwelo nenhlupheko nokushodwa kwamathuba emisebenzi kanye nokungalingani kwethu kuleli lizwe. The so-called recovery plan presented by the president here, zingezinye zezindlela ezinganasiqinisekiso nezingacabangisisiwe kahle esifunzwa zona kule minyaka eminingi eyedlule. Kepha isishiya sixakeke kakhulu kunakuqala. Kunamhlanje kusayithi abantu abamnyama esingenamisebenzi, esingenamakhaya, esingenamhlaba, futhi esihlukumezekile. Kuyithi abantu abamnyama esidlala inhlupheko ngenxa yobuholi obusiphethe nobuhlulekile ukunakekela umnotho wethu. Izimo esiphila ngaphansi kwazo zinyantisa igazi ikakhulukazi kumuntu wesimame omnyama. As a woman, we work as poorly paid domestic workers. We are excluded from meaningful economic opportunities in this country simply because we are women. Mongameli, uyakwazi lokho, kepha ukhetha ukukuziba ungenzi lutho ukukhipha abantu besifazane kulolu bishi. Siyazi ukuthi ibala lethu lisetshenziswa ukuba sibandlululwe kanye nobulili bethu nabo busetshenziswa kanjalo. We do have a legislative and a policy framework for inclusion of and advancement of Black people in this country, but if these are poorly implemented, ngeke kusize abantu besifazane kuleli lizwe. Lamacebo okuhlenga lomnotho ngeke asize umuntu if umuntu wesifazane engacatshangelwa. It must be a young Black women who are given access to land and given the infrastructure and implement to use that land productively. It must be young Black women who are the focus of skill development programs so that the oxygen needed in our economy can be found in these women. Mongameli, kunamakhulukhulu abantu besifazane acwaswayo emkhakhweni construction and real estate sector. Bazitshwa ilo hulumeni kanye ne-private sector. Nawe Mongameli ukhetha owesilisa omhlophe to develop your so-called Mooikloof City projects. Your recovery plan, Mongameli, does not speak about the structural defects in a manner in our states is made up. You did not address the need to rationalize the work of the national, provincial, and local government. Imikhandlu yethu isezimeni ezingagculisi ngenxa yokuthi ayinakiwe. Le mikhandlu inikezwa ingcosana kwisabelo zemali kazwelonke nayo leyo ngcosana iyebiwa abosopolitiki abangakaze balethwe ngaphambi komthetho labangakaze bashushiswe. Mongameli, we cannot rebuild the economy if there is no concrete plan to build a capacity of local government. Asikwazi ukunaka umnotho uma singakwazi ukwakha izindawo emkhandlini yethu ezokwazi ukutshala ukudla esidlayo, ezokwazi ukwenza izimpahla esizigqokayo kanye nezokwazi ukumba leli golide liphinde lipholishwe khona la kuleli lizwe. Kumele sivikele izimboni zakuleli lizwe kwizimboni zangaphandle. Ukunikezwa kwabantu abamnyama umhlaba kungeke kwasisiza ngalutho uma imboni yethu ingeke ize ivikelelwe kwizimboni zangaphandle. Sidinga icebo elizokwazi ukwakha kabusha umcebo wethu nelizoqinisekisa ukuba abantu abamnyama besifazane bavikelekile. Kepha icebo lakho Mongameli alisho lutho ngabantu besifazane. Mongameli, icebo lakho liyohlala lihluleka njalo uma ungakwazi ukuqaqa lamaketango esiboshwe ngawo nokungalingani ezweni lokhokho bethu. Ngiyabonga.
Thank you very much. Honorable Nyotso.
Chairperson, the President has squandered an opportunity to consult widely and include every segment of society in a social compact that would eventually allow everyone to contribute their inputs and views on the draft of the recovery plan. The President has instead gone to the usual suspects to craft a national economic and recovery plan. It's a messianic approach that would soon be found to be wanting. NEDLAC is no longer fit for purpose. It's now an old boys club. We need innovative approaches. The labor segment in NEDLAC is narrow-minded and one-dimensional. They are steeped in the past, yet the President relies on them. It is a big business that calls the shots in NEDLAC. The PAC starts from the view that the Azanian masses are their own liberators. It is counterproductive to do things for them without them. The greatest flaw in the recovery plan is to go to moneylenders like the International Monetary Fund to inject enthusiasm in the economy. This is in fact injecting poisonous venom. The IMF lays down conditionalities in their loans to countries. The state president has ignored suggestions from prominent economists who said that an inward-looking approach would have yielded resources internally in the Republic of South Africa to stimulate the economy again. So in the development of a recovery plan, things remain the same. We are facing a downward spiral that would leave the majority of the citizens in worse circumstances than before. Corruption has become a bigger thief benefiting its administrators, and law enforcement seems to be focusing only on one clique or societal grouping. We call for the arrest and prosecution of all implicated, black, white, rich or poor, political connected or not. Isela Lisela, I thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is going to be the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, Honorable Sihle Zikalala. Honorable Zikalala.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, Honorable Chairperson of the House, His Excellency the President Cyril Ramaphosa, His Excellency Deputy President Mabuza, I wish to join the President in pledging solidarity with our citizens for their sacrifices, patriotism, and extraordinary resilience they displayed as we were faced with COVID-19 pandemic and our socio-economic headwind. Honorable Speaker, our approach to economic reconstruction and recovery plan as presented by the President, we fully concur with you, Honorable President, that it can never be business as usual. As you say, to embrace the new normal, our great nation must rebuild, repair, and restore our country, not after COVID, but in the midst of COVID-19. The objectives of economic recovery and reconstruction and recovery plan respond directly to the devastating catastrophe imposed by COVID-19 on our economy, but further addresses the persistent apartheid legacy of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. This plan further goes to respond to the call for economic restructuring, which should find expression through the overhaul of the economic structure. On infrastructure build, we believe that the infrastructure such as school, water, sanitation, and housing will greatly benefit our people. We see this as both immediate stimulus, which will unleash immediate job opportunities, but will also serve as an enabler for future economic development which feeds on other economic sectors. Critical to this plan is the localization, where all building material would have to be manufactured domestically. Infrastructure is critical. It will provide jobs for skilled and unskilled labor. Your Excellency, President, as KwaZulu-Natal, we welcome this infrastructure plan and we believe it will expedite the implementation of the strategic projects such as Umzimkulu Water Dam, which will provide people of Uku District Municipality and Herikwala District with water. But this plan will also expedite port development, including Durban Port, which is the biggest port in the sub-Saharan Africa and carries about 60% cargo for our country. Ports development remains critical for enhancement of the country's trade competitiveness. Our primary objective and interest is for the country to enhance domestic production and increase export market. Honorable members, in KwaZulu-Natal, we are finalizing the establishment of KwaZulu-Natal Strategic Infrastructure Development Agency to accelerate radical economic transformation. We will use this agency to implement the Provincial Infrastructure Master Plan and transform the construction, maintenance, and facility management within the infrastructure sector. The construction sector contributes about 4% to the GDP of our province and employs 290,630. The sector has a value chain with almost every sector, such as metal fabrication, plastic, forest, timber, glass, and others. The sector is also dominated. It also caters for youth, SMMEs, and informal players. Honorable members, as part of what was presented by the President, the apartheid regime failed to grow the export market. But since the democratic breakthrough, we continue to see more trade balance between export and import. As reflected by Status A and highlighted by the President in his last week address, it is welcome news that last year, South Africa recorded its first trade surplus with the European Union, driven by the record export of manufactured goods. I wonder where was Honorable Shivambu when the President presented this. I would also equally encourage him to consult Status A report so that he will be exposed to this reality rather than to come here and fabricate. Road export is the reflection of the domestic production growth, which has a potential to grow employment. But this growth should be anchored on diverse and inclusive of economic ownership, which include blacks, women, youth, and people with disabilities. Honorable members, the economic restructuring and recovery plan talks to agriculture and agro-processing, which remain critical for food security for our country and export market. In this regard, we applaud the work that is currently underway on land redistribution. In 2020 State of the Nation address, the President indicated that the state will release 700,000 hectares of land to enhance black participation in agriculture. On the 1st of October 2020, Minister Tidiza announced that the state is ready to release land and fulfill the undertaking made by the President in the soil. This process has identified 21 farms in KwaZulu-Natal, measuring approximately 9,307 hectares. The criteria to distribute this land will prioritize women, youth, and people with disabilities. This will be advertised by the department at the end of this month. Honorable members who have spoken before me are saying that the President always presents plans, but there is no implementation. This is one of the implementation that they must refer to. As reported in this House before, KwaZulu-Natal remains steadfast on the implementation of radical economic transformation. Hence, we are proceeding with the radical socio-agrarian transformation, wherein we support small-scale farmers through logistical implements, monitoring, and sustainable government market. As a result, women-owned entities are benefiting through the government school nutrition program, as well as retail stores where they supply vegetables on weekly basis. We are equally on track on the program of building 4 agri-hubs, which will ensure processing of all agricultural products, including vegetable crops and livestock for all our 11 districts. While many industries were hard hit by COVID-19, agriculture has remained as one among those resilient sectors and have a great potential for our province and the country at large. Thus, we believe that as the country we have to normalize the relationship between the farmers and farm workers. We should address farm killing and at the same time deal with the exploitation farm workers and farm dwellers.
Thank you very much, Premier. The next speaker is Honorable Gigi Hill-Lewis.
Thank you. Thank you, House Chairman. It's been a lively debate this afternoon, and there's been some good points made by both sides. But I'm afraid the speakers on the government benches haven't really risen to the occasion of defending the President's speech and telling us how the plans he set out would be implemented. Because of course that was the big lacuna from last Thursday's speech. A very nice sounding plan, as some have called it, a wish list or a Santa letter, but there was nothing on actually how it's going to be done. And that is the big question mark that hangs over the President's head. The finance minister is fond of speaking of the mouth of the hippo, the big debt, the big gap between government debt and government revenue. But there's another hippo's mouth that needs to be addressed, and that's the big gap between what the President says and what this government does. And that wasn't addressed today, not by any of the government speakers. In fact, we've gone back and we've tracked exactly how many times the President has made these same promises before, since he was elected more than 2 years ago. We went back 520 days, Mr. President, to your first State of the Nation address, and we tracked them all. We found that in 73% of cases, there has been no progress at all on the reform commitments you've made. And we've put all of that available in a document. I invite you to visit our webpage to have a look. Where there has been progress, we've given credit, like in independent power producer regulation. We've given credit for that. But still, in most cases, there's been no progress to speak of at all. Now, today we heard from the Minister of Tourism, who has a very lovely shirt on, but who told us that her plan for implementation is going to be another council that's going to be responsible for speeding up implementation. Now, the general rule is that the speed of implementation is inversely proportional to the number of councils and committees involved. I don't think that's going to help at all. In fact, it's quite terrifying. Now, the consequences of this delay, Mr. President, were clear before lockdown, and they are even clearer, terrifyingly so now, after lockdown. We have an economy that teeters on the edge, and a society that increasingly feels like it's spinning out of control. And we heard them again today, Mr. President. The purveyors of hate and division are back again, back from the past, back from the 90s, preying on the poor to drive South Africans apart and preach violence as an answer. We heard the Honourable Shivambu call you a sellout, a disgusting slur. That is to be rejected. And that is why, in the end, your plan failed to bring South Africans together around a vision of growth and reform that pulls us towards the centre, instead of giving more oxygen to those who are driving us apart. You have to now show that you are serious about what you said. Serious not just about the language of reform, but actual reform. Here are 3 things that you must do to show that you are serious, Mr. President. Ministers who stand in the way of reform should be removed from office. Number 2, commit to clear and immovable timeframes for implementation that we as Parliament and the public can hold you to. And number 3, don't choose South African Airways. Stop all further bailouts of SAA. That would show you are serious. It is immoral, Honourable Shabalala, to cut essential public services to fund yet another bailout for SAA. Between schools and SAA, choose schools. Between hospitals and SAA, choose hospitals. If you dither any longer...
Your time is up.
All right. Thank you very much. Choose the people of South Africa over SAA. Thank you.
And now the Minister of Minerals and Resources and Energy, Honorable Kwede Mantashe.
Uncle Kweze.
Iyahamba le watch ndikaqali. Iyahamba kodwa ndikaqali. Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, Comrade Thandi Modise, Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Mr. Amos Masondo, His Excellency President Matamera Cyril Ramaphosa, His Excellency Deputy President David Mabuza, honorable members, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. From the onset of confronting COVID-19 pandemic, our rallying cry was saving lives, saving livelihoods. So that guided our action. Now, our countrymen and women in the health sector steered us through the storm in their steering effort to save our lives. When the pandemic descended and our country went into a lockdown to halt the spread, our economy was already in recession, and subsequent downgrades by rating agencies sank the economy further. Then the pandemic sounded a death knell in the climate beleaguered by inhibiting high cost of electricity. You must remember that electricity price increased by 177% in the last decade. Now, therefore, the reliance of the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan on our ability to secure reliable and affordable supply of energy. Our plan must, however, transcend the pre-COVID-19 level to grow the economy to be on par with our country's development. This plan is different in that it talks to practical programs and imposing tasks to sectors. So that is a formula for execution. Now, expanding the country's energy generation capacity is a priority intervention to support the rapid economic rebound. This is central to us saving our livelihoods. Honorable members, the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, to those who say it never happened, I want to remind Honorable Ryder, has heeded the call of the President by fully implementing the Integrated Resource Plan 2019. Now, Honorable Ryder didn't take notice of that. The department targets to deliver a total of 16,313 megawatts of electricity from a mixed energy sources. Now, this includes procurement of 2,000 megawatts of emergency power to meet the short-term electricity supply gap. We issued the request for proposal and bid submission for closing soon, will be closing soon. Power procured will be fully operational and connected to the national grid by June 2022. That is the time frame. Now, procurement of 11,813 megawatts from various energy sources
broken down as follows: 6,800 megawatts from renewables, and 513 megawatts from storage, 3,000 megawatts from gas, and 1,500 megawatts from coal. For this purpose, we gazetted Section 34 ministerial determination with the intention to urgently connect new generation capacity to the national grid. Request for proposal will be issued in December 2020 to enable the opening of various bids, including the much talked about bid window 5. Now, it is important for us to appreciate that that bid window 5 is adding to bid window 4, which was open in 2018. But when you talk about just bid window 4, you will not understand. Then let's tell you, of that, 375 megawatts are connected to the grid. 1,000 will be connected by December, 375 by June 2021, 415 megawatts by December 2021, and 140 by March 2022. So the 2,305 from bid window 4 will only be complete by March 2022. Leave the hurry by many. Now, having said that, I would like to actually appreciate the fact that issuing of request for information for 2,500 megawatts for nuclear bill program has been issued. You say, ha, ha. Now, that is testing the market. It doesn't help us, all of us, to say we don't want nuclear, we don't want that. You test the market. When the market responds, you build nuclear plants. So we're issuing the request for information for nuclear plants, and we said we'll build them at a rate and pace that the country can afford. That is what we said. Now, we have also gazetted an amendment to Schedule 2 of Electricity Regulation Act to exempt categories of generation facilities under 1 megawatt and resellers from requirement to hold a generation license. NERSA has already registered 156 self-generation licenses under 1 megawatt, totaling to 72 megawatts of electricity already generated. Now, through effecting the provision of distributed generation in the IRP 2019 for facilities of 1 megawatt per and above, thereby removing the ministerial approval for deviation from IRP before NERSA can process generation license application. To date, NERSA has issued 5 applications at that category. Now, further, we've gazetted the amendment of electricity regulation on new generation capacity to enable municipalities, listen to the qualifier, in good financial standing to develop their own power generation projects. And the amended clarify the regime applicable to municipalities when requesting for determination under Section 34 of the Electricity Act. Recognizing ESCOM's role in the electricity sector, the government is working tirelessly to achieve significant systems improvement through ESCOM maintenance program. I'm sure those who follow, not just want to rubbish, they would have followed that Mr. Directors, who is the CEO of ESCOM, said Medupi will be complete correcting the mistakes by December. Now, when a CEO says that, you take him serious. Now, looking ahead, we have considered the feasibility of natural gas for economic use in South African market, which includes accelerating exploration of our own natural gas for domestic feedstock. I can tell you without fear that on Friday I will be on the drill rig in Bulprata, south of George. to just see the progress we're making. The drilling is continuing there. And that is what implementation means, doing things practically. Now, now having the private company working with us, yes, the department was in the process of consulting stakeholders on upstream petroleum resource development bill, and community communication was halted. Now we're going to begin again to do with that consultation. Now, as directed by the President, the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan should fast-track returns to reduce cost of doing business in the country. This is to be facilitated, this was to facilitate investment, achieve economic growth and transformation. A government focused to renew investment in exploration. Now, those who don't know what exploration is to look for minerals, drill, you quantify the quality and quantity of minerals. That we are investing in that project. Now we are investing in exploration, working with the Council for Geoscience, and we are also giving effect to a commitment to reduce the time frame for mining and prospecting licenses. But I must admit that that is a little bit heavy, but we're going to work hard for it. We're also formalizing artisanal mining and thereby creating revenue to mine sterilized deposits. Now, saving lives, saving livelihoods is a social compact between government, social actors, and society. This is a core to the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan. This is reminiscent of our ability. So the focus, I want to emphasize, is on execution, which is focus, pay attention to lead activities, pay attention to lag activities, quantify progress. As part of the plan, sectoral reports will be submitted every month. Now, let me, before I sit down, my time is getting out. Now, the DA says there is incompatibility with economic reforms and is history. Now, for the first time in this plan, economic reforms are broken down. These are the actions that you should do to effect economic reforms. Number two, Honorable Shivambu said, we have not said anything about land question, because his understanding of land question is grabbing it for informal settlement. When you talk about food security, he doesn't understand that is land. Now, so it is in the plan. Therefore, import substitution industrialization is taken about in localization.
Your time is up,
and therefore
Minister.
it is too complex a concept for ethics.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now call on the Honorable President to close the debate. Honorable President.
Thank you, Chairperson of the NCOP, Mr. Amos Masondo, and Honorable Speaker, Ms. Thandi Modise, Ministers and Deputy Ministers, members of the NCOP and the National Assembly, and those who have traveled far from our various provinces. I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to respond to the debate of this joint sitting on the most critical and challenging issue facing our country at this moment. One of the reasons I chose to present this Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan to the joint sitting of Parliament was to give the elected leaders of our country the opportunity to have a thoroughgoing and robust debate on the plan rather than to grandstand and to throw barbs at each other. I intended to listen to the proposals and suggestions that could take our country forward. I wish to thank those who have participated in this debate and those who have made valuable suggestions and constructive criticism to the plan. We've had a spirited debate or engagement, which is a defining feature of our democracy, and I'd like to thank you all for that. Through this debate, we are adding to the participation of our people in various forms who have participated in radio shows, in meetings, and also economists who have made a number of suggestions, and some have criticized it. But in the end, we have to put a plan on the table. It may well sound like we are repeating what we have said in the past. Yes, that may well be so. It may well sound like we have not come up with anything new. But I think if you read between those lines and those paragraphs, and if we all take time to look at this plan carefully, we will find that there is a new resolve, there's a new determination, and this plan is underpinned by the participation of the social partners we've got in our country. This plan outlines immediate actions to rebuild the economy and to provide jobs and relief to the people of our country. These actions include an aggressive infrastructure program. Yes, I have often spoken about infrastructure, and I've decried the fact that we have not been investing in infrastructure, let alone even maintaining our current infrastructure. I have to talk about it all the time because an infrastructure investment is what defines a nation. And we are now on the cusp of seeing a real robust and aggressive infrastructure investment program. We also are talking about far-reaching reforms to increase our competitiveness and inclusiveness. We're also talking about measures to catalyze industrialization. We're also talking about relief measures for vulnerable households and individuals, as well as a public investment in employment programs. These may all sound like old programs, things that we've repeated in the past. Yes, that may well be so. But we have a new resolve. And this resolve is born out of the critical and urgent situation that we face right now. Because this plan is a response to a severe economic contraction, unlike any we have experienced in recent memory. And this is where we've been calling on all South Africans. And Prince Buthelezi is absolutely right. This is not the time to grandstand, it is the time to close ranks as South Africans and to work together to achieve a common purpose. And our country is not alone in experiencing an economic crisis of this depth and extent. Many other countries around the world are experiencing exactly the same problems as we are. Unemployment has risen across the world and nearly every economy has shrunk. It is true that the measures that were necessary to delay the spread of the virus and prevent deaths led to a sharp decline in economic activity. But there is now substantial evidence that the economic contraction has been even worse in countries that took fewer measures to protect their people, and where the pandemic has spiraled out of control. Honorable Steenhuisen, had we not taken the measures that we did, which you supported, you and your party supported, the measures that we did to contain the spread of the virus, many more lives, as you admitted then, would have been lost. The economic impact would have been worse, and we would not even be in a position to be talking about an economic recovery. These exceptional circumstances require nothing less than they have a direct bearing, they have a direct effect on their lives. They have a bearing on their prospects for finding work, the recovery of their businesses, and indeed in our collective future. Business owners worry about being able to recover their overheads and pay their employees. Families worry about their ability to pay their bills that are piling up every month so that they can see the year through. Those who are unemployed worry about their prospects in this climate of economic hardship. In this debate, we have had many divergent viewpoints, yet we are of one mind as to the urgency of the task at hand. We are all agreed that even the best laid plans will amount to nothing unless those plans are matched by an undivided focus on implementation. Above all, we agree that people must be at the center of the recovery effort. We must not come with theoretical statements. We must be very practical. What South Africans want from Parliament today is reassurance that we are committed to a swift and inclusive recovery, that we will do whatever it takes, and that we have their best interests at heart. That is what South Africans are interested in. Our challenge is not only to recover to pre-pandemic levels of economic activity, but to lift ourselves out of an economic decline, out of this hole that has been several years in the making, while seeking to undo structural distortions that were many decades in the making. That much we will accept. Unlike more than other national economies, we have to recover jobs that were lost as we had to shut down much of the economy, but also to alleviate the plight of millions of people who were already jobless before the pandemic hit. That is why we need to build an inclusive economy out of the ashes of this pandemic. We need to implement existing commitments faster and more effectively, and at the same time, introduce new measures to respond to a new context. To ensure that our efforts are focused, our plan is driven by 5 key priorities: infrastructure investment and delivery, an employment stimulus, energy security, measures to promote localization and African integration, and to improve the capacity of the state. The plan is underpinned by a commitment to fiscal sustainability and economic growth. And the Minister of Finance will talk about much of this next week when he tables his medium-term budget policy statement. It is about choosing a few things and doing them properly. Our immediate focus is job creation. Why is that so? Because many of our people have lost jobs. But even before then, our unemployment rate has been growing at alarming levels over a number of years. The plan recognizes that the private sector is by far the biggest driver of employment. That is why the plan emphasizes growth-enhancing measures that enable businesses to recover, to grow, and to thrive. This involves, in the first instance, urgent steps to remove the impediments to investment and greater economic activity. These include fixing our energy challenges, undertaking structural reforms in areas like telecommunications and transport, and improving the ease of doing business. It also includes, in the second instance, major interventions that will stimulate economic activity and create opportunities for business. Among the most significant of these is the ambitious infrastructure build and maintenance program, which consists of a reliable pipeline of bankable projects and which uses public funding to leverage, in other words, to enable and induce the private sector and others, pension funds, many other funds, to invest alongside with us. This supports and is complemented by a concerted drive to produce far more of the goods and services we consume locally, and in the process to improve the competitiveness of our exports. There is a firm commitment from all social partners to use both public and private procurement to promote localization and the development of industry. We now want to go beyond just saying, buy South Africa. We want now to see it happening in reality, because it is out of buying locally made goods that we will be able to promote reindustrialization as well as manufacturing. We are accelerating the finalization of sector master plans to ensure that key economic sectors of our economy are ready and equipped to meet the demand that will ensue from this process of localization, of procurement, both locally and from abroad. There should be no doubt that this plan aims to unleash the capacity of the private sector to create jobs on a far greater scale and at a greater pace as well. But the plan also recognizes that our people need work and they need jobs now. It recognizes that even with rapid progress in the implementation of the plan, it will take some time for the labor market to fully recover. Now, through the presidential employment stimulus, we are using a substantial expansion in the scope of public employment programs to mitigate unemployment and support recovery. We are not the only country in the world that is doing this. One looks, for instance, at India's Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, which is one of the world's largest public employment programs, and which has succeeded in facilitating work opportunities for Indians and alleviating poverty. Over the next 3 years, 100 billion rand in public investment will create hundreds of thousands of work opportunities and support livelihoods in many sectors. We will be boosting existing programs such as the expanded Public Works Program and Community Work Program, but we will also be innovating on other fronts to create avenues for social employment in communities. Social employment offers income security to those who are of working age but have been unable to find work. One of the other things that it really does is to provide pathways to securing formal employment and entrepreneurial activity, particularly to women and young people. As our economic recovery advances and our reform effort gathers momentum and pace, more jobs will be created by the private sector, and the scale of public employment will accordingly decline. The depth of the challenges we face mean that we should not be making a choice between public employment and private sector job creation. We need these approaches right now on a scale we have not achieved before. Those who have criticized the plan have tended to look just on the one side of the scale. And we say, look at both. What governments should do is to stimulate economic activity and to induce the private sector to invest, which is precisely what we are seeking to do, so that we can ensure economic recovery and make sure that it is inclusive. The plan prioritizes the development of small, medium, and micro enterprises. These businesses have the greatest potential to create jobs, to empower all our people, especially Black people, women, and youth, and to reduce inequality. It is through this that we will be able to engender the radical socio-economic transformation that our country so needs. In every aspect of the plan, from infrastructure development to localization and to African integration and procurement, there is a deliberate effort to expand the opportunities for small, medium enterprises so that they can participate, including formations such as cooperatives, which are so effective not only in the rural areas, but in many areas where our people live. This will take place alongside a focused support program to enable small, medium enterprises to participate in manufacturing value chains as well. Particular attention will be given to supporting women-empowered SMMEs as a vehicle for women's economic inclusion and for securing women's financial independence. The challenges of the economic recovery require that we dedicate sufficient resources to implement the National Strategic Plan to combat gender-based violence and femicide. It is critical that we scale up, and we will scale up funding for the Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Council, as well as its programs to empower the women of our country. The African Continental Free Trade Area will open up the doors of trading and present a huge opportunity for the growth of South Africa's industrial capacity. The AfCFTA will transform trade in one of the fastest growing regions in the world, creating a massive market for goods and services with expectations of a virtuous cycle of increasing intra-African trade and international investment. And this treaty has the potential to make a concrete impact on the lives of ordinary citizens across our continent. Now, our country is well positioned to respond to the growing demand on the continent for manufactured goods and other products, as we can effectively use this to drive the industrialization of our economy. Many of our compatriots on the African continent say, rather than buy our goods in Europe, in Americas, and many other places, they say we want to buy them here on the African continent, not only because it is nice to do so, because it is also cheaper, and it is also going to drive employment and industrialization of our continent. Unlike our exports to markets like the European Union, China, and the United States, which tend to be skewed towards raw material exports, a large proportion of our exports to other African countries are essentially manufactured goods. And this is a great advantage that we need to play up and rely on. We therefore have a firm foundation on which to expand the export of value-added products, creating more jobs and deriving greater value from our abundant natural resources. As we do this, it is important that we ensure that women, youth, people with disabilities, and other marginalized groups participate in the great push for intra-Africa trade. Even as we debate this plan, economic recovery has begun in earnest. We are pushing ahead with the work that is needed to tackle inefficiencies and improve competitiveness of our economy. During the past few weeks, we have published an invitation to apply for high-speed spectrum that will enable modernization of our telecommunication system. We've delayed, we are late, we admit that, but we are moving ahead. We've made significant progress in our efforts to achieve energy security, activating the process for the procurement of new generating capacity in line with the integrated resource plan, and issuing new regulations to allow municipalities in good financial standing to generate their own power. Minister Mantashe is pushing this ahead. Agreements with independent power producers to expand our generation capacity are being concluded, and we are unlocking emergency electricity supply. The 700 hectares of state-owned land that we are going to make available to our people is one of the measures that we are embarking upon to fulfill the promise of land redistribution to our people and to expand our agricultural production, which Minister Mantashe so eloquently spoke about. Making access to land to our people remains one of the key pillars of our developmental and transformative policy approaches to improve the lives of our people. This we are moving ahead with without any form of let-up. We do this because it is important that we achieve the goals that we have set up for implementation of our plan. It is through consensus building between government, business, and labor and civil society that we've been able to develop a common program. And the same spirit of collaboration and partnership must guide us in the difficult days ahead. As political parties, we can come together to see this plan to fruition. Or we can spend the next few months in a state of paralysis as we pick this plan apart, but as we also tear each other apart. I believe that that is not what our people want to see us doing as the elected leaders of the nation. They want to see us working together, coming up with suggestions and proposals that will address the challenges that they face. That is all our people are interested in. Our foremost concern, therefore, is to make sure that this plan works, not to cement the legacy of an administration, nor to serve the interests of one or another political party. It must work for the people of South Africa. Our vision as a new economy lays a foundation for economic growth that is inclusive, sustainable, and durable. And I call on all South Africans to support this plan, but also to insist on implementation. I'd like this Parliament, yes, to make us accountable for the implementation of this plan. I'd like this Parliament to insist in executing its task that we implement this plan. So I call on leaders across society to lend your wisdom, your ideas, and your encouragement to the National Economic Recovery Council, which will be driving the implementation of this plan. We should heed the words of Honorable Prince Buthelezi when he says that, like a country at war, we must put aside political agendas to rebuild our country. Regardless of where we sit across the political divide, we must find the political courage to unite behind this common vision of our recovery. We must work together to build this inclusive economy that we need and to build a South Africa that works. If we act of one mind and of one purpose, we will surely prevail. I therefore thank you all for your participation in this plan, and now implementation will go on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Once again, let us thank the Honorable President for his participation in this important joint sitting. That, honorable members, concludes the business for the day, and this joint sitting is adjourned.
Abonga Salo. Manda.